So welcome and shalom to the Australia-Israel Scholars Seminar Series. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Turrbal and Yagara people as the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and their custodianship of the land. I pay my respect to their ancestors and their descendants. So welcome everyone, and I'm really excited today to welcome Professor Assaf Shwartz, who's an ecologist and head of the Department of Landscape Architecture at the Technion in Israel. Professor Shwartz is a conservation biologist who specializes in theoretically grounded applied research into how to promote environmental stewardship and human well-being. And Assaf just spent a year at UQ in Brisbane, which is really exciting, and we hope he can come back and visit us again soon. And so Assaf's talk today will be on planning cities for nature positive future. I'll hand over to Assaf. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everybody in Australia here. Good morning. And it's really a pleasure of being here and talk a little bit about my research, which gonna go through concept of nature positive future, green biophilic cities, and biodiverse cities. So I think every talk I give, I start with this slide and literally saying that human consumption of natural resources like food, fiber, urbanization, like land, timber, paper, energy, and of course, seafood and other resources are causing a huge biodiversity environmental crisis. Species extinction, climate change, deletion and degradation of natural ecosystem. I honestly, it's every talk I give, I start with this slide. And I think this is the only talk that I'm really gonna touch for the first time in my life, touch something that really touches the basics of this issue. All my research is dealing with mitigating it, but I think this one, the first one, it's a bit different. That's why I like to remind myself. So human is waging a war on nature. This is a word of the Antonio Guterres, the UN secretary. This is suicidal. Making peace with nature is the defining task of the 21st century. It must be the top priority for everyone. I think we couldn't agree more. We see what happened all over the world, the environmental crisis, climate crisis, of course, the biodiversity crisis. And for many years as ecologists, we tried to kind of halt the biodiversity, the reduction, the extinction of species that I just mentioned and talked about. But I think there are people more and more are thinking we need to take a more proactive approach, not just stopping the biodiversity crisis you can see here, but also trying to recover it. Thinking about a nature positive future, and the idea of this nature positive initiative is to stop the halt by 2020 or a bit after that, and then start recovering for full biodiversity, ideally by 2050. And this will come back in handy. Now the problem is that this biodiversity crisis is caused by our action, but my action, your action, everyone's action, human activity is causing this action, and the solution to it will largely depend in the behavior of individuals, but also our ability to persuade government to act. And that's a bit challenging because the same processes that threatens biodiversity, like urbanization and agriculture intensification and modern lifestyle that you can see here in the picture, is also separating people from experience of nature. And this is a big problem first because people with reduced connection to nature don't care and probably not gonna behave to protect nature, but also it impacts there is huge amount of literature showing that nature interaction impact our health and well-being. And so therefore it's very important also not for nature protection, but also for us. And this stuff we're studying quite a lot in our lab. Now, if you think about ecologists, what normally we do, we study ecological practices. So we study, for instance, documenting the deforestation and what can we do, what are the solutions. But if you can think about this deeply, the problem of conservation is not really about ecology. Again, it's about changing people action, changing people behavior. And when I was in UQ last year, I was starting to talk with my colleagues about this topic, that we do quite a lot of ecological, very important, and Australia is one of the leaders in the world, and UQ is one of the leaders in the world in this kind of conservation research. And we're doing quite a lot of this great research in ecology, but at the end of the day, it's humans that need to take action. And we are failing in making humans change their behavior. So we did a systematic review, try to look at, again, what the kind of literature we have about behavioral change in relation to biodiversity and nature conservation. This is the search. And look, already the results, we had 1,125 hits And out of this, only 108 empirical paper that looked at pro-biodiversity behaviors. There's a lot of pro-environmental stuff, which is a different topic, which I'm not going to review today, but most of the studies, 108, only 108 look at pro-biodiversity, which I'll give you examples before. Interestingly, only 3 studies related these behaviors to impact. So we have very little knowledge about how people, organization, government behave, or actually how we behave, and what are the ecological impact on this. And when you look at this behavior, I cannot give you a long list of behavior. We identified over 30 types of behavior, but I give you a few examples, like donate money for conservation, plant trees, for farmers to restore the field margin, or to put less pesticides, signing petition, recycling, using sustainable transport. All this stuff were studied in this 108 empirical studies. But if you think about it, do you really think that we're going to save nature by keeping our cats contained? Or do you really think you're going to plant, all of us going to start planting trees? Do you really think that's going to stop the biodiversity crisis? Or even if you're going to put few margin on sustainable gardening, and we can sign so many petitions, everything is important. I'm not saying these are not important, but it doesn't feel it touches the right issue. And so it's a lot of individual behavior. The literature is covered with mostly individual behavior with relatively little impact. So I was all keen to study those impacts with my colleagues here, but I think it was Rich Fuller who said that, but this all seemed like so small and not important. What are the big problems? The other thing that came in the workshop we held in UQ was that we give such a list of good behavior. This is kind of shocking for people. What should I do first? Should I plant a tree? Should I contain my cat? Sustainable transport? Do a garden? Recycle? I don't know what to do. And this can lead to kind of a decision paralysis. And we thought about it, and we thought about climate change. And climate change is pretty simple. Yes, in climate change, you know what you have to do. There is carbon emission. It's straightforward. So we need something simple. We need something simple in conservation biology that can help us bend the biodiversity curve, like people like to do in carbon emission. I think everybody knows what they should do in carbon emission. So this is what we have at the moment. We have lots of pro-biodiversity, mostly individual behavior, less research on organizational and societal research. And we don't know about the impact. Oh, sorry, something happened here. Oops. Oh, sorry. So we tried to develop what we call the 3 C's for pro-biodiversity conservation. And the first one is reduce consumption. Clearly, the way we consume our resources is so straightforward. That's the source of the biodiversity. That's the pressure on nature. So if everybody here that listens to us now, you can do something very simple. Just reduce your consumption. And as an example, in Europe, there was a study in Europe, if every European would have reduced their meat, like red meat, dietary in $1 per year, we can create habitats for 5 million birds. This is huge. Just $1 per year. This is nothing. So simple. I didn't ask you to change your life. Don't stop eating meat, but $1 a year. Imagine if what people can do more than $1 a year. Yes. So consuming less, reducing the pressure on nature. The second one is compact living. And actually, Brisbane is not a good example for compact living in Australia in general. Yes. So basically, compact living is space-conscious lifestyle that maximize functionality and minimize a spatial footprint. And we can fit the entire world population can fit in Japan if we live in Paris density. And we need area, if you look at Brisbane density, we need area which is almost as big as Russia to fit the entire world. So you can imagine, if you just live compactly, agriculture and urban, we can actually reduce our spatial distribution and reduce the impact, free some space for nature conservation. And the last C is connection to nature. Clearly, people would not like to reduce their consumption and live compactly if they don't have a good connection to nature. We need to understand that we're doing this for nature conservation. And the problem with all this issue of conservation starts with our broken relationship with nature, as I said before. And so the 3 C's together, that's at least for us, the three simple, straightforward principles that everybody can apply in their life. So consuming less, try to do as compact living as possible, and stay connected with nature. So what I would like to do next is talk a little bit more about one of those aspects, the compact living that we're currently studying in Israel. And this is the question of how can we plan cities, again, for a biodiverse future. And it's important to introduce principle here, like the sparing sharing, one of the debates in conservation. We have a given scenario here. We have protected area on one side, you have sprawl green cities on the other hand, like in dense green cities like the CBD of Brisbane and the kind of all the neighborhoods around it. Like St. Lucia, you can imagine this is like the sprawl, and the dense is the center of Brisbane, which is a bit more high-rise, but you can imagine much more. And we need to, we need to populate more people. How can we do that? One way we can say, okay, we're gonna build over those sprawled area and densify the city, yes, and leave the protected areas of the park as they are. Sorry. And the alternative option is, okay, now we can spread more and more. This is called, the first one called land sparing, the second one called land sharing. And there is debate in ecology that came from agriculture. Well, on what should we focus? Land sparing, land sharing, what will be the ecological and other consequences of such planning strategies? And in fact, the literature is quite scarce. There's not too much studies in the urban context. There is a review published last year, highlighting 8 studies showing kind of mixed results. And none of these papers that was conducted so far, one of them for Brisbane, of course, none of them was done on the regional scale. Most of them were done on the city scale, and we wanted to expand this to much bigger scale. So this is the PhD of Lior Ventura, which is currently papers under review. We took the whole Tel Aviv district, so 14 cities, area of 170 square kilometers of built area, and also green and agriculture area in the region, as you can see here in the side. So the more urban and agriculture areas, so the whole region, including protected areas, and which kind of along a gradient. So starting from Tel Aviv towards Herzliya, the nature protected areas are kind of held in green, the islands and agriculture in yellow. So very diverse mosaic of green spaces, and we distributed more than 2,000 points randomly on the landscape. So it's huge. You can see this sampling size is huge. There's a lot of information, and sample birds and plants. So they're just going to talk about birds. We have the huge and very good high resolution data, LiDAR about plants, height and plants cover, land use cover, lots of other data that was used to build our models. And we kind of wanted to see what will happen if we'll develop the country under different scenarios. Now we sample altogether almost 200 species of birds in our region, which is the most densely populated region. But we couldn't run the model for all those species, just for 72 species, and look at different type of scenario. Some of them more realistic, less realistic. The first scenario, we call it again land sharing, and basically here we do kind of a sprawl approach. So we're gonna develop for real Israeli targets, but we're going to develop based on agriculture areas and make it sprawl and sprawl and sprawl, respecting the current laws of building. So mostly building on agriculture area. As you can see in the small video, in sprawl approach, you're kind of losing most of the agriculture area. The other one was sparing, basically just densifying mostly the cities centers and actually building higher. Already it's a 3 or 4 stories building. We build higher for 10 and sometimes 20. So we densify. Again, in this scenario, we all the time respect the regulation of the country, and we do exactly what we can do. Yes, so it's a decision, and it's respecting the planning laws of the country. And what we saw from this, again, we looked at different scenario. I'm just showing these 2 scenario, the extreme. What we saw that if you look at the sharing scenario, we are going to have actually about 40% reduction in the habitat available for birds, migrant birds, 34 for species that are non-synanthropic, so non-invasive and non-human, not one that's not related to human. And of course, somebody loses, somebody wins. So the myna, the invasive species, the crows, the pigeons, they will benefit completely. 64 increase in the synanthropic species, the one that are actually close to human, they're going to have huge benefit. If you look at the sparing scenario, actually it's not so bad. Yes, it's not so bad. We get about a bit of a reduction minor in migrant, no effect on the non-synanthropic species, and almost small increase for the synanthropic, again, the one that we're trying to find solution for. But this is great, but it's still not a nature positive future. So if you want a nature positive future, you need to be much more proactive. That's going to kind of freeze the situation the way it is, so keeping it in the current situation. So then we came up for 2 other crazy scenarios. We went for full sparing, in which we take the outskirts of the cities and we make them nature reserve or urban parks. Starts, taking cities and convert them to nature. It sounds imaginary, but we can do that. We took 30%, so we can do that in a model. We took 30% of the city and restore them ecologically. That was one scenario I want to present today, and the other we call it local sparing. And in the local sparing, we kind of take places within the city, like which are not very densely populated, and convert them to urban parks and reserves. So within the city, make the cities more green, but still densify other parts. So we're still meeting the population targets of Israel, of this region, but in a different approach of densifying and making green spaces. And look at the results of the full sparing, which we took 30% of the urban area and reduced it. We get an increase of 11% of migrant species, 11% of non-synanthropic, and a bit reduction of synanthropic. So great, we can get some benefits, some ecological benefit. For the local sparing, again, we get almost no impact. So it didn't really change dramatically the diversity, a bit reduction in migrant again, a bit increase in synanthropic, but again, almost no effect no significant effect for synanthropic species. And this kind of, again, if trying to summarize my talk and talked about compact living. So think about it, restoring 30%. So taking 30% of the urban area and making it nature will only give us about 10% benefit of biodiversity. And if you take in, at least again, in our context, if you think that cities that cover about 4% of the world terrestrial surface, I would say that we should not expect that from cities we're going to get a biodiverse, nature positive future. Yes, that's not the case. Even in such a huge intervention, we don't get an amazing effect. So I think we should be more moderate and think about what do you want cities, and again, relate to other stuff I presented. And this is very important because look what happened to the area available, the green space available for people. So in the sparing, in the full sparing, and in the normal sparing, we're getting a reduction of almost 5% and more than about 15% by 2050 for in the area available for each resident. So basically, what are we showing? That we're gonna make more disconnection from nature. People will be less connected to nature, and this is a problem. Again, as I said before, because connection to nature, pro biodiversity behavior, as I said before, and health and well-being. So this scenario is not a sustainable one. And again, a lot of my research in the lab are kind of studying this, but I don't have time to talk about it. The connection between connection to nature and well-being. So how important it is to bring spaces. So I would say that land sparing and full land sparing is not a sustainable solution in the urban context. And instead, what we said, we kind of came up with, we need to consider how to design green and dense biophilic cities. So what are green and dense biophilic cities? So of course, they are dense, they have green opportunities. We need to think about enhancing local biodiversity, minimizing the sprawl. So keep the space as much as possible, smaller, provide various opportunities. Like here is the picture from the Gazelle Valley in Jerusalem, opportunities for people to interact, have a meaningful interaction with nature. And again, create those livable, healthy cities that connect people to nature, care for nature, and then of course the 3 C's. And I would like to end today with the 3 C's and remind you all, if you want to do something for nature, very simple, consume less, try to be conscious about the space you use in the way, in your choices of vacation, traveling, everything, and also where you live, and stay connected to nature. So thank you very much. And thank you for all my collaborators from Australia, from Israel, Belgium. It's been a real pleasure working this project with you guys, and happy to take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assaf. That was really fascinating and touches on so many important topics for what's happening in the world today. Thank you again. A huge round of applause. And Yoni as well. Well, I have a lot of questions, but when you're looking at those scenarios for the city of sprawling or spreading, what kind of time frame were those studies looking at?
Yeah, so we follow the nature positive framework. I think I didn't explain it well enough. We followed the nature positive framework, so we looked at 2050. And so by 2050, we expect to get increase. So that's for 2050. And we look at the population density increase expected in Israel is quite high. It's around 2%. We did it per city. So we're talking about 14 cities in an area of bigger than 320 square kilometers. So it's quite large, with settlements, rural settlements, urban settlements, so various type of settlements. And again, we respected the first set of scenarios, really respected the kind of I'm sitting in our faculty of architecture, so respected the laws of building and the how to what can be done and what possible to.
So you showed the demonstration on Tel Aviv, but you did it for Brisbane as well, is that right?
No. It was done for Brisbane. Jessica Tichinsky and Rich Fuller many years ago, and again Brenda. So that's and in Brisbane as well. You find that if you basically if you want to spread Brisbane, this is a different story, different paper. But when they did it on Brisbane, they also found similarly that land sparing will be better for Brisbane than land sharing. So if you need to make Brisbane bigger, again, this same result came also for birds. But as you see, it's not convincing yet, and there's much more work to see and to learn. And not everybody agrees with us that land sparing is better. There's some, just in Australia, for instance, and it's something I learned from Dave, one of Dave Kendall's paper, that there is, Australia, there is quite a lot of rare and endangered species within cities. So cities can be a real hotspot. In general, Australian nature is really amazing, and it penetrates into the city. So it's a big question. In Israel, this kind of sprawl is really damaging, and we need to again keep it compact as much as we can.
Yoni, do you have a question?
Yeah. Thanks, Assaf, for the incredible talk. I have a naive question that's coming from a non-naive viewpoint. So I'm in applied mathematics optimization, as you know, as wonderful that you know Israel and Southeast Queensland well. You obviously know that, you visited the group of Hugh Possingham and that where he was, etc. And in math, there's an objective, right? An objective is this one thing that you optimize, right? And well, at least sometimes it could be multi-criteria, but there's one thing that you optimize. But you decide the objective from outside of the math framework. You subjectively decide that that's an important thing. So my very naive question is why is biodiversity, let's say that it's quantifiable and you have techniques for quantifying it, why is it important? Just the naive public question with a lot of math around it.
So again, what you argue here is that we're kind of optimizing, and within this is not optimization model. This is not that model we use here, but in general, we kind of optimizing but for biodiversity in the first round. But then you see that the way we did that, and I didn't have time to present, we looked at lots of other variables. So one of them is the availability of green space, agriculture, and other stuff that I did not have time to present, just showing the green space per person. So I think we're not trying to, I would say it's more Pareto optimization in our case. So you want to optimize for people and for biodiversity. So again, I'm not doing optimization. Why biodiversity is important? It's a general question. Okay, why any element, any species, any element of nature is important? So species have intrinsic values like you and me, and we can go to more philosophical question about it. Why the diversity? Yes. So why diversity and not whatever an individual species? Again, there's quite a lot of literature about it. In the fact that biodiversity, basically, the ecosystems that are more diverse, the more resilient, they provide more functions. Yes, and there are more resilient for change, and therefore that will be something that we would like to aim. In ecology, in conservation biology, it's kind of biodiversity became a theme, which I'm not always agreeing that that's the main thing. That we only need to look at diversity. If these systems are pretty complex. If you want to make something simple, and again, in this case, again, each model was conducted for different. We have 72 species, so there's 72 species. Each one of those species have a different service to people, different function, and of course, the intrinsic value. I don't think the diversity is the most important thing, I would say.
I see. Okay, so it's one aspect of this Pareto optimal frontier that you're trying to find.
I would say that again. I would say that I'm trying to look at both angles, like the nature. So we need to find something to quantify nature. Yeah. So people use that biodiversity as a variance of nature, and And in this case, the biodiversity is 72 species. Yes, the area the 72 species occupied. But again, any suggestion? But I mean, are of course are great, and I'm thinking about that. For me, like a bird out of the 72, a small bird that no one see other than you, Rich, and myself, is less important in the urban context than a kakadu or a honeybee or something that everybody sees and enjoy, or a fairy wren or something like that people can really interact with. So I think the urban context is also about the interaction. So looking at the biodiversity per se may not be the best approach, I would say. You should look at individual species that people really can interact and can actually make them connected to nature.
I see.
Question.
Yeah, no, it resonates well. Joe, can I ask another follow-up question?
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. So following up exactly on this other thought I had is living here in Brisbane, Australia, and I'm actually stopped the car. As you can see, I stopped it next to a reserve where, as you probably know, here on the fencing, they put this cloth so koalas won't climb over the fence, right? Even though there are very few koalas. So I sometimes ask myself, why the big focus on koalas? I mean, there are many other species that are not as iconic. And maybe you can relate that based on what you know in Australia to what you previously said.
Why the big thing to say? I don't know the literature that way in that regard. Yeah. So why the big? It's a question I'm asking myself. Why do we like some species? So I study which species do we like. I never and I think people like. There are some theories about people like species that are closer to them. Okay. That are so that either we have some kind of affective, or so they're very colorful or something really nice, or they like them, that they feel again close to them. I think the koalas are, I would say, cute. I don't know. So they're really attractive. But this is again, I don't have good answers again because I'm not conducting such a research. I did not conduct so far such a research. I think it's important. So I think it's important, and again, because the way to protect other species gonna pass through those flag species like koalas. The people connect, and as soon as you connected the habitat for the koalas, for the kangaroos, or for the birds, there are lots of other species that need to survive, and we need to use those flag species to consider to kind of protect the whole ecosystem. So for me, it's pretty important. Again, to look, I'm completely accepting to look, but there is no real reason. Yes, it's a koala or a wallaby or a kangaroo or any type of birds that you have there. Similarly important, to my opinion. Yes.
Fair enough. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I'm a science communicator, so I would say it's all about the storytelling to get people engaged. And so koalas are such an iconic species in Australia that's connected to the Australian identity, that if you tell a story about a koala and get people to change their behavior around the koala, you are in a way, helping to support the whole ecosystem that supports that koala.
Yes, so it's completely a question of communication. I can tell you, I went to this sanctuary where my kids last year when they can pet a koala, which was very strange to me. And apologies, this is the sanctuary, but my older son is more, he's more nature-led person. My daughter a bit less, but she was thrilled, and the experience she had there, a connection to nature. She was at the peak, and she fell in love again with nature. Okay, and it was amazing for her. Something you will never forget. And even it was strange for me. I saw, and I know I still felt strange in this place, yes, but I felt it's amazing. It's amazing what it's doing to her. She tells about it. She thinks about it. We can get to talk to her about behavior connection that be pro-biodiversity behavior that she can do to protect koalas, etc., like consumption, everything. We can get to those topics through the koalas. So yeah, so we need this communication you mentioned, especially people like you to work in conservation, by the way.
Yeah, actually, that's really interesting because the Lone Pine Sanctuary in Brisbane has just stopped doing koala holding.
Yes.
They've just, after many years, but still the exposure and being around nature is so important. I wanted to touch on, you spoke how changing behavior is the key way to improve biodiversity. And yet these kind of changing the way that our cities are built. I mean, that it entirely depends on people accepting that as a way of being. And certainly in Brisbane, you see a lot of resistance to densification in the suburbs of Brisbane to stop the urban sprawl. Is that something you've looked at with your research around, spreading or sharing?
So I think people don't really, I think people, that's what we're trying to advocate here with the 3 C's. First of all, I think I don't know, I can't say about Brisbane, but people are really afraid of dense cities because dense cities traditionally look like buildings and concrete, and it is intimidating. But imagine, I don't know if you have a chance to visit Singapore or Berlin. What happens if you have like a dense city which is also green? So you get out of your house and you have a nature park just next to you, and there is a public transport like in Brisbane that like all the buses goes below. Yes, there's the public transport on top. You've got a nature. Yes, and there is a sidewalk and there is stores and everything, but there is a huge park, and you can get everything. You can get. So I don't believe this kind of model will be the place to protect biodiversity. Biodiversity, native species will struggle in this kind of context. I have to say, because they're not going to benefit. But imagine those people that can grab a coffee, buy themselves a new AirPods, or buy something they need to buy, yes, or shop for food, and then just sit for a second on a bench and look at the beautiful birds. Yes. Imagine this opportunity. Imagine what happens if we have apps that tells us, like apps going to tell us, hey guys, come on and come now and see the fairway, and they're now flying next to the big tree next to McDonald's. Yes. So of course I'm giving an example which are consumption example, and this is again, but imagine different cities, green and dense biophilic cities are different than what you know today. And I believe that if we're going to come up with this model, and there are cities that are aiming that direction today, if we come up with this kind of model, we need to be creative. Yes, we've been creative creating cities, which is a revolution. Yes, so we've been creative in making cities, but now we'll be creative making the new cities that are green, that are dense, and kind of allow nice urban life. Can have your coffee, but also see the nature just next to you. And that's why I'm here in the Faculty of Architecture and Town Planning, because these are the people who are going to plan them. Yes, exactly. Those people have to be creative. I keep on telling the students, you are the one that will create the environment for the future. You'll decide if you're going to give the same kind of building and, with no green walls, no green roof. Like, sorry for that, but I'm giving you a very long answer. But in general, think about the building. The building did not change for centuries, for millennia. It's the same bricks building, yeah, with different plaster, whatever. But what about making like green walls all around? And we're working in this project now called Ecolopes, like living envelopes. Why are you thinking about a building the way it is now for centuries? We can have soil, yes, and then we actually increase the amount of area available for species. So there's so many opportunities here to do, and we need to follow them and try to change cities. And then what you say will be, of course, nobody to take time, but people start saying, okay, I can have everything in the same spot. Now I want to live in this city, which is great. I want densifying.
Wow, that's a really inspiring vision of the future. And I think we need to see more of that in Australia, the potential for creating green cities. I would love to live in a dense green city like that. Thank you so much, Assaf. I think we'll wrap it up there for today. I've really enjoyed your presentation. We will share it around with our colleagues in Australia, and hope that people can tune in for future seminars. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Joe and Yoni, and good to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.